2008 Mercedes GL450 front brake pads, rotors, and sensor replacement. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive. I'm going to walk you through that process. Get started, I'm going to get the car up in the air. If you're doing this at home, you're going to use floor jacks and jack stands. And right here underneath the frame is where you would jack it up from and put your jack stands. And go ahead and remove the front wheels. Okay, after getting the wheels off, the next step we need to do is remove this clip here. And the way I do it is I can use both hands and put both thumbs on here, push in and lift it upwards like that. So the next step is going to be to remove these little caps that are on the calipers here. So you remove one here, and there's going to be one below here, and you take those off. Once you get those out, then you're going to take a 9mm Allen socket like this and put it in the hole where you took the cap off, and there's a bolt inside this pin, and they call it a caliper slide pin, and you'll unbolt it and take it out, top and bottom. So when you get the two pins out, they're going to look like this. So you're going to set these aside for now. Next, I'm going to take my pad lining sensor here and just unplug it, and you can use needle nose pliers or whatever and just wiggle it out and unplug it. So now that we got the slide pins out and the sensor unplugged here, we need to get the caliper off. But on European cars, they have soft, the metal is soft and it wears fast, and it develops these lips and grooves on the rotors, so when you go to pull the caliper off, it won't come off even after you got it unbolted. So what you need to do is you actually need to push the piston back into the bore just a little bit to get the caliper off, and you can do that by sticking a screwdriver in between the rotor and the pad and kind of give it a little pry like this, and that pushes the piston back in a little bit. And then once it pushes the piston in a little bit, then you can pry the caliper off. So you want to push it in a little bit, take the caliper off, and kind of just set it up on top of the rotor suspension here. Now that the caliper is off, we can inspect the boots here and make sure that the dust boots for the pistons are not torn or in any way, and there's no fluid leaking out of the pistons. So now we need to get this caliper bracket off. So you can go ahead and remove your outer pad. It just slides off. And then remove the pad. And then on the back side, there's going to be two 21mm bolts holding the bracket on. So what I like to do is turn the wheel. I'm working on the passenger side here, so I turn the wheel left, and now it gives me access to the bolt. So I'm going to use my 21mm socket and impact gun and take those off. If you don't have that, you can just use a 21mm wrench or a 20mm socket, and standard breaker bar or probably a 1/2-inch drive ratchet would work best to remove these. So on your rotor right here is supposed to be a screw with a little Allen bolt that you would take out, and then you would remove your rotor. But it looks like somebody's done this brake job before and didn't know that was there, and they actually broke it off in the rotor. And it's like that on both sides. So yours is going to have a screw, so you're going to remove the screw here. And then what I like to do after you remove the screw, the rotor is most likely going to be stuck to the hub. What you can do is start a lug nut like this in it, and then strike the back of the rotor with a hammer, and then it pops free, and then the lug nut prevents it from falling off and falling on your floor or falling on your feet. Then you can remove the lug nut and finish removing the rotor. So now we're completely torn down, and we're gonna prep the bracket and the pistons, the calipers, and lube everything up and start reassembling. So I'm gonna start with a wire brush like this, and I'm gonna use the wire brush and clean the channels out where the pads ride on the bracket here, and clean them up real good. So after cleaning them up, then I'm gonna take a little grease. This is called Seal Glide. It's the type we use at the shop here. And there's different brands like Molly grease and stuff, but especially it's designed for brakes, and it's high temperature, it doesn't break down. It's like a silicone base. So I'm going to take a real thin layer, and I mean thin layer, and I'm going to put it on the channels where the brake pads ride, just to lube things up. And the reason why we do a thin layer is if you put too much on here and it's too thick, the brake dust itself will build up on it and actually cause the pads to stick. Okay, before I press the pistons back into the caliper, what I like to do is I like to come to the master cylinder, take the cap off, and suck out a couple ounces of brake fluid. And also when I do this, I can check the condition of the brake fluid itself and see what it's like, and if it needs to be flushed, recommend a flush for it. But we're going to remove a little bit of brake fluid, and I'm going to use this little device here. It's kind of like, it's a vacuum pump that you just pump it and it sucks the fluid out. But if you don't have something like this, you can use a turkey baster. It works really well. You just squeeze it, pull a little bit out, and dispose of the fluid. And then after we sucked a few out, then I'll show you what we'll do next. So now we're going to press the pistons back in, and I'm going to use a special tool to do that. But when we do that, we're not going to open the bleeder screw. And what that does is when you push the pistons back in, it pushes the brake fluid that's in the caliper back into the line and back into the master cylinder. And that's the reason why we remove some of the fluid, because if the master cylinder is too full, if it's ever been topped off, it'll overflow and spill into the engine bay. So one of the easiest tools to use to do this job is to use a C-clamp like this. You just clamp it leave the old brake pad in there, put it in between the two pistons, center it in the back of the caliper, and just twist the caliper in like that, and it pulls the pistons in. That's easy. Or you can use large channel locks will work too. And then also they also make a tool like this. It's kind of like a caulking gun, and you just squeeze it and it'll press the piston in for you. Now you got the pistons fully seated back into its bores. You can go ahead and remove your old brake pad. Okay, next you can go ahead and put your rotor on and put the screw that holds it on. Mine doesn't have it, so I'm just going to hold it in place with a lug nut here and tighten that up. And then after that, we're going to put our caliper bracket back on. But before we bolt it up, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little Loctite or thread sealer. This brand is Permanex, and we're just going to pour a little on the threads, and you can see the old ones had it on there. It's like a glue that helps prevent these bolts from vibrating loose and coming back off, because they don't have lock washers on them. So it's very important that you put do this step. Is put a couple dabs of Loctite or Permanex brand or something like that. So after putting the caliper back on with the Loctite, go ahead and tighten the bolts. I used my impact gun. You can use your breaker bar and tighten the caliper brackets up. They're pretty tight. So now I'm going to prep the pads by putting a little of this brake seal glide grease on the backing, on the shims, on the backing plate, and the backing of the brake pads themselves, and press in my new sensor. And you can refer to the old one how it went, but the nipple on it, if you can see it in there, it faces inwards towards the actual lining of the pad. So go ahead and press that in, put a thin layer of grease on the back, and this helps reduce squeaking and vibrations. Go ahead and put your outer pad on the bracket like so, and you'll take the inner pad and press it into the caliper. These little ears will press into the pistons. So now you can slip the caliper back onto the bracket, and we're going to put a little of that lube on the pins, and we're going to lube these pins up. Maybe put a little lube inside the boot here where the caliper slid through the pin, and then we'll put these in and tighten those up. Now that the caliper's tight, we can go ahead and put our little dust caps back on. They just press in, top and bottom. Then you can go ahead and take your sensor and you line it up like so, and press it back into its spot. After that, we're going to need to put on our little bracket here, the clip here. And the way I do that is I put the ears on the caliper like so, and I kind of hold it at an angle like that, and with two thumbs I push it. So after you get it in, you want to make sure that the ears catch on the corners here, and give it a little pull to make sure. Now you can go ahead and install your wheel and torque the wheel down, lower the car down, and then you're going to pump the brake pedal several times until the pedal becomes firm, nice and firm. And after pumping it like 6 or 7 times, if it's not firm by then, you got air in the system, or if you open the bleeder screw for any reason, then you would have to bleed the brakes. But I've by pushing the pistons in the way I showed you, you pretty much never get air in the system. You just have to pump the pedal and you're done. And then you're going to top off the master cylinder with .4 brake fluid to the proper level, and that completes the front brake pads, rotors, and sensor replacement on a 2008 Mercedes GL450. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive, and I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos and encourage you to subscribe for more valuable videos like this. Thank you.